China, the world's trailblazing pioneer of interactive digital entertainment legislation, is testing yet another set of regulations aimed at video games. Specifically under Section 17 forbids any forced PvP in online video games. Now, does that sound kind of familiar? Consensual PvP, permission to be able to have PvP. Ring any bells on some of the PvP changes that we've had recently? Okay, so this one, I'm kind of just going to be spitballing here, but I've been putting together some notes and some things, and I want to start off by a lot of this is just conspiracy, but I do think the conversation is potentially worthwhile having. I want to talk about the release of Black Desert coming up soon in the China region. And for a while, I've heard mentions of players talking about how China is going to be having some big influence on the potential changes that happen in the game, may already have. A lot of this has just been statements from people. A lot of this has just been opinion and speculation. So I decided to do a bit of digging and deep diving. And what I've managed to find is definitely something to consider. I think the conversation is at least decent to have. However, bear in mind, I cannot speak any of this as factual, but I do think this is interesting enough to make mention of and also make a video on. So let's kind of get started here. As we know, Black Desert has been in the regions of NA, EU, Russia, SEA, Korea, and it's been released for quite a few years now. We've had a pretty good lifetime. But we've had a lot of questionable changes. We've had a lot of questionable things that have happened that are genuinely negatively affecting the game with kind of no reason or explanation behind it. A lot of the things that players have mentioned is that Korea seems to have more influence on the impact and changes in this game, more than typically any other region. Now, just recently, yesterday, from the making of this video, we had my good friend, Mr. Blue Squadron here, jump into a podcast with people from all different regions, EU, South America, the MENA servers, console servers, ourselves on NA, as well as Korea. And he did a good job asking questions across everybody, as well as having a Korean translator to kind of get a little bit of a scope in on what it is like on Korea. Now, I think this podcast is a pretty good listen. I think it's a pretty good watch if you guys are interested in checking it out. I will definitely link this in the description down below for you to listen to. But the gist of what I have heard is it seems like the majority of regions are experiencing a lot of the same issues. So it sounds like we are kind of experiencing these same problems. A lot of us are unhappy with the state of the game, the staleness. A lot of us are trying to criticize positive changes to steer this game in a better direction. The general topic that has been had across a lot of Twitch streams, YouTube, and the BDO partner community has just been of criticisms of things that have happened, with a lot of questions raised as to why these changes are happening. Now, again, I've seen a lot of speculation on China's influence since Black Desert is now been accepted into the Chinese market. What seemed like first starting with mobile, but now is going to be expanding out into the PC platform and as well as console, and will be going out into China, what seems like at the either end of this year or potentially earlier stages of the following year. I do not know what the release time is, but I do know that very, very recently, China had a in-person introduction. What seemed like players were able to come to this and test the game in person, and it just being kind of in front of the public, where players were able to link up on these computers, play the game, and things like that. And what we do know is in October, Black Desert is going to be put into beta for the Chinese region. And make no mistake, the Chinese market is a powerhouse. It is a massive untapped community to lay foot in. So this expedition that I'm referring to happened in about less than 30 days ago, about mid-July, later July. And then a couple months from then, the game is going to be in beta for them. Now, going on to the Black Desert Online official website for China, there seems to be no forums because the game isn't released yet. So I've been trying my absolute best to see if I can find any sort of player information and player feedback and more information in regards to that. But however, Billy, this website here, this is what I've been told, which is essentially China's YouTube. And I've been able to find a bit of content on here as well as player comments and things like that. So let's go ahead. We're going to search up Black Desert here. There's a few funny things we're going to notice along the way as we go through here. So we do have some recent and relevant content, but as I scroll down just a bit and go through some of the pages, unironically enough, on the Chinese website, I've actually found direct re-uploads of creators' content that you may also be familiar with. Here is one of my videos, which has been re-uploaded by someone, and this video has been re-uploaded actually by several people. I have found content creators such as Choice being re-uploaded, Lazy Peon, myself, Chris Poley, and the list goes on. So it's been quite interesting. But what's been a little bit more interesting from the findings that I have found, we can find content that's been more released to current times. The general consensus of what I've been able to gather through the comments that I've read through a variety of these videos in the Chinese player base and market is that since this is a brand new game for them, it just seems to be kind of highly anticipated by the community. And these are just the quick thoughts that I've managed to gather through going through quite a few videos and seeing what the general public just kind of has to say on more of these more recent posts. So China is excited. Are they going to get Wukong? Who knows? But China's excited. China's a powerhouse, and the Chinese region is going to have Black Desert very, very soon. Now, what does this all have to do with the state of the game and all these changes that are happening? The Chinese market is potentially going to have influence on changes that could occur in the game, both now and in the very near future. But again, this is all just speculation, so take this with a grain of salt. One of the more interesting things that I have come across in some of the notes I've been taking is that there have been a few changes that have happened in the Chinese government or law that has to do with forced PvP in game modes that are more survival based and have the option for PvP. And things that I've gathered is that forced PvP seems to just be a thing that they are not a fan of, and it seems to be something that is going against the laws within the Chinese development side. A more interesting article that I came across was this one here that was linked to me, which had to do with EVE. China, the world's trailblazing pioneer of interactive digital entertainment legislation, is testing yet another set of regulations aimed at video games. Specifically under Section 17 forbids any forced PvP in online video games. This means any PvP in any open setting such as EVE or World of Warcraft, which is what this article covers, or basically any multiplayer survival game. This obviously wouldn't apply to PvP in games like League of Legends or Counter-Strike, where it's effectively the sole focus of the game, with players consenting to take in match-made contests of skill with other players. It's re-educating camp time for you, buddy. That's tongue-in-cheek, of course, as the regulations would be enforced at the developer level and not aimed at the individual gamers. Now, does that sound kind of familiar? Consensual PvP, permission to be able to have PvP. Ring any bells on some of the PvP changes that we've had recently? But it sure is interesting reading some of the stuff that has to do with the Chinese market and China being the region that's going to be released right around the corner. I've seen people talk about potentially, are we going to see open world PvP and the Alt-C for flagging up disabled? Are we going to see this as well on Arsha servers? Probably not, since I guess swapping over there may follow the suit of consensual PvP, but who knows? Now, the thing that I've talked about is that BDO, when they come out with their content releases, they do a really good job focusing on new players. A lot of the content updates that come out focus new players or returning players. That seems to be the big market that they like to target on a pretty regular basis. And here's the concern that I have. If Korea, South America, Southeast Asia, Russia, EU, console, etc. are facing all of these similar issues, are these issues going to be put on the back burner because we're just becoming a lower priority on the totem pole? Because if you think about it, if we just talk about the simple idea of the game's quality over time, there's definitely some arguments in which direction this has gone. But China's not going to have to worry about that at any time soon because BDO releases in chapters, if you will. And I'll talk about that in a second. But more importantly, rather than quality over time, let's talk about the players over time. And don't forget, PA is a business at the end of the day. They're out here to make money. And that's why I've continuously said that it just feels like as of recent, PA has been making decisions that is PA first, players second. PA is going to do everything they can to continue to thrive as a business, where we're just going to have to follow the trail of where they lead us to. What do players equal? Well, players simply, in my perspective, equal money. So when a new game comes out, in my perspective, typically the games usually do the best when they are released because everyone's got eyeballs on them. For a while, people may play this for a bit. People figure out if they want to play this or not. The player base kind of diminishes over time as we remain stagnant with a more true line of where the player base is at. There might be more updates that come out that bring people back to playing it, but then eventually, like, the player base over time typically will be going down over the lifetime of the game. Sometimes you'll see games come out with dramatic updates that continue to expand the lifetime of the game. But I feel like for BDO right now, this is kind of the direction it feels like it's headed over time, especially with some of the changes that have been happening. This has to go with Korea. This has to go with Russia. This has to go with NA. But what is just around the corner is China. And of course, I feel pretty confident that we're going to see kind of a similar effect here. We're going to see a very similar effect of people are going to play it in high volume. Those who like it may remain into the game. Updates will come out. Player base will probably go down as the lifetime of the game goes on, etc., etc., etc. The reason why I'm bringing this up is because with China being released just right around the corner, with new players being such a priority focus for what seems like their business margin, if we are all regions are in this type of state, what profit margin do you think they're going to focus on? I feel like it's just so clear. Now, does this have influence on some of the changes we're going to see, some of the things we're going to see in the near future? Yeah, it very well could. We very well could see China release and changes happen based on Chinese influence, which I don't think is a bad thing per se. But with some of the changes we have seen that are very, very different from what we're used to, I have a feeling that maybe the speculation and conspiracy may have a bit more truth behind it based on some of the digging and reading that I've been doing. I have spent hours going through Black Desert Chinese content, Black Desert Chinese websites, going through Chinese content and trying to translate this as best I can, even having some Chinese people help me out with giving me access to their accounts on their platforms to be able to do some more digging on this stuff. And I really think it's just been an interesting topic that's just kind of surfaced. And we talk about BDO's priority list. If this were a totem pole of who is on the priority list, I feel like for the longest time, it would look kind of like this. We'd have Korea at the top. We'd have potentially Russia or NA and EU following suit after. I feel like that one's debatable. You know, you've got SEA, you've got console over here because honestly, you guys are quite literally in the trash bin. Don't worry about these guys. But with some of the changes that are happening, we got a new contender around the corner. We got China. And with all of that untapped potential, I would not be shocked if they are absolutely at the top of their priority list right now. If I could go into PA right now and see a checklist of where their priorities are set right now, I would not be shocked if we just saw China at the top of that list. And for all of these changes that are happening, it honestly genuinely feels like China number one, everyone else, well, that's simple. You guys are on the back burner because China number one. And one thing I found it interesting to even consider is the player-based volume, because even with Korea, Russia, NAEU, and China being this completely untapped player market for them, and they are a powerhouse, make no mistake, I genuinely question if all of our powers combined right now is a limited number, and I genuinely question if China, the volume of players, exceeds these numbers combined, which would lead to me thinking who would have the most influence? China. Now, again, I don't think it's a bad thing. However, some of these changes that are occurring and doing some more reading, the only thing that I can continue to make sense of that leads me to keep thinking of is that this is having influence with what's around the corner with them releasing in China soon. And I think what's interesting to consider is the quality of this game over time. We use very, very advanced chart tools here, so appreciate this high level production. But the quality of the game has gone up over time. It's gone down. It's gone up. It's gone down. You know, we're in a weird position. Where are we right now? We're in a weird spot right now. But more importantly, there's a lot of pros and cons to take with what is released in all regions, because I genuinely feel like through the pros and the cons, China is going to get the absolute best version of BDO. And they're not going to, and that's the thing, China's not going to run into the same problems that we have right now with Deborica accessories and things like that. Think about it, because when console had come out, console had got released in a very unique way, but console still got released in chapters, just like all these other regions have gotten released in chapters. Korea gets things first, we follow after, other regions follow beyond that. Console gets things whenever Jay figures out how it's going to work on console. But I'm willing to put a lot of my chips on the table here, if not all of them, that China is going to have the same type of release that we've seen, where it's going to be in chapters, such as Balanos, Serendia, Calfian, maybe see a Medaya region release, maybe see a Valencia region release, maybe see a Kama Sylvia region release. Who knows if they'll even go up to C20? Maybe they'll do C10, because C10 seems to be the direction that they've headed with the Fallen God armors and pieces like that. Eventually seeing Drigan release, Odalita release, Mountain of Eternal Winter release, Land of the Morning Light, Ulakita. The whole point of what I'm getting at is PA is not going to put all their cards on the table, and China will not run into the same issues that we currently have for potentially years to come. If any, maybe we'll have a solution by then. I would love that to be the case scenario. I would love to see some positive influence, have a really good turnaround for the state of the game. But with all the conspiracies that I have been hearing with the Chinese influence, I just haven't seen a lot of material that kind of backs the conspiracy. So that's why I've tried to take my time in trying to make sense of a lot of this stuff. And the more that I start to ponder it, the more I start to put some of these pieces together to make sense of this type of stuff seems to make the most sense to me. So again, I'm not saying this is factual. I'm not saying this is whatever, but I do think it's something more interesting to consider based on some of the changes that we've actually been having and been seeing, and potential influence we may have in the future and near future as well. But I genuinely fear that all of those concerns for all of these regions were just going to get put on the back burner, simply because China is right around the corner. It's an insane bigger market potential and profit margins for them to set in, because again, PA is a business and they're just going to focus on what helps the business thrive. But what I can confirm is that the Chinese player base, a lot of people who have their eyes on this game are anticipating it and are excited for it. And I wouldn't be shocked if Jay is salivating at the idea of being able to get a second Bugatti in pearlescent Cronstone blue. We've got top guilds quitting. We've got top players backing out. We've got everyone addressing very similar concerns abroad. And I honestly have felt like this whole conspiracy of oh, the Chinese market having influence in the current state of the game is just ridiculous. But once investing quite a few hours into just looking more into this, it's just, I don't know. I just can't help but feel like it's actually starting to make a bit more sense in my perspective. But again, I can't say all this is factual, as this is just merely opinion. I do think there are at least some things to consider right now. I'm going to take my tinfoil hat off. And hopefully the aliens will beam me up soon so we can get the fuck out of this mess right now and get back to 2019, 2020. But if you guys really enjoyed 2019, 2020 Black Desert Online, fear not, we'll be able to get that again if you hop onto the Chinese servers. So I'll see you guys there.